Okay, hello. So, I want to talk to you about RawTherapee. You need to check this out. It's awesome. It's so cool. It's free. Uh, Go download it. And when you download it, you have to download the film stimulation collection. So, look, you go to rawtherapee.com. Download RawTherapee. Go to downloads. Download the newest version. You can get it for Windows or Apple, and you can get it for like most of your Linux versions. I run it on Linux all the time. I'm only in Windows now to show you. So I just had to install this because I had the older version. So because that's how often I use Windows. You go here, you download it. You go to Rawpedia, rawpedia.rawtherapee.com to read about how to use it. You have to read this if you're going to use it. I'm going to show you stuff in this video, but you have to read this and you have to play around yourself. But you go here to film simulation, and the download is here. Let's see what happens if we click it. Here we go, and you download this file here. Download. It's 400 MB. It's huge. Download that. Follow the instructions. When you open RawTherapee, go to Preferences, Image Processing, HALD CLUT Directory. Mine's already set. You just point this where those files are that you downloaded. Put them in a place that you like. I put them like with all my pictures, and then I point there. Now, when you open RawTherapee, you're going to do that. You're going to see this. And there's the file browser over here on the left. We're in the file browser. There's the queue, and there's the editor. The queue is for when you're exporting your photos after you've made the adjustments. So we'll double click. Oh, over here you see you can navigate to your files because it's not library based, which I love. Some people don't love that. And we're gonna click one of these and go in. Clicking that twice will take us into the editor, but before we do, I'm just gonna tell you how I found this and why I think it's so good. So I found this while using Adobe Lightroom for 10 years. And I have a few cameras. One of them is a Fuji, and one day I thought, well, I'm not getting the best results with Lightroom with these Fuji files. I want to find something that does them better. So I tried a bunch of RAW processors. I tried SilkyPix, I tried Iridian X Transformer, I tried Skylum Luminar, I tried Exposure X3 and X4, I tried Affinity Photo, and I tried free ones like Darktable, NEF Raw, and this RawTherapee. And what I found was that the best results I could get with the Fuji files was with Iridian X Transformer. SilkyPix was number 2. Probably SilkyPix could be number 1 if you work at it. RawTherapee might be number 3, but the main thing I found comparing all those RAW converters with the Fuji files was the Fuji files just aren't very good. They just aren't very good. Sorry, they're not. But when that was all finished, I thought I would just drag a Canon file into RawTherapee and play around and see what happened, and it blew my mind. It blew my mind. And when I compared the output with the output from Lightroom, it blew my mind even more. It was a stark difference. The detail from RawTherapee was better. Often the color was better. And from playing with it, I could see that the tools were way more powerful. Like, in comparison now, if I look at Lightroom, it looks like a mobile phone app for 16-year-olds compared to RawTherapee would be like what they use at the university or something. That's what the difference is like, right? So that's how I found it. Why do I think it's so good? Well, I told you I think picture quality is the best. I love how it gives you multiple choices for how to demosaic your picture. So you have a demosaicing algorithm that's better for high ISO pictures. You have one for pixel shift if you have a camera that does pixel shift. You have one that's better for your Fuji files. You have ones that are for $50,000 camera rigs that you'll never see in your life. Nice that it's in the free software, because I don't think it's in Adobe, even though 100 million people give them at least $10 a month. They didn't manage that. RawTherapee gives you unique tools like wavelets, Retinex, Scilab, which you probably don't know what they are. I'll show you now in a minute. And it gives you just a crazy amount of control, right? Like, more control than you know what to do with yet. Put it that way, right? Once you play with it, I've been using this for a year and I'm still not bored. And I still don't know how to use it good. I'm still learning. The film simulation is awesome. It has killed plugins for me, because I used to use the Nick plugins like Silver Effects Pro and whatever other. Anyway, I don't need them anymore. I use this instead. It's like as good or better. And the main advantage of it is that it is free and open source. And you're not thinking about this when you go out to look for something to process your raw files. I wasn't thinking about it when I went out looking for raw processing software, but after using it, it's unbelievable how much of an advantage that is. Because, for example, the stuff that's available from the community is crazy. Now, I'm here in Windows, but my daily driver is Linux Mint and not Windows, obviously. And I have an unstable development version of RawTherapee that has local adjustments. Not in the official version, because some guy built it. Or maybe some girl, I don't know who built it. Someone built it, but you can do that. You could make your own RawTherapee, and that's why it's not only is it more powerful because you've got all this cool stuff from the community, but it's and you can make yourself if you're smart enough, but also it's better for your long-term archiving and organizing of your pictures, because it's not library based and it's not reliant on Adobe or somebody. RawTherapee is free and open source. If the people who make it want to stop, they can. The code is out there. It's free and open source. You can make your own. You can make your own version of RawTherapee if you want to, right? And people do, and you can go download them. It's awesome. So that's why I think it's so good. Now, and one more thing. Part of the reason I'm making this video is because despite the incredibly transparent and detailed information at Rawpedia, it is often not written in people talk. So, let's look at the wavelet tool. It's hard to read this for me, because I'm not a computer person, right? But it's easier for me to watch someone do it, or to be explained how it works on a picture, right? So I was looking for that. I didn't find much of it. I found a really good video by a guy called Andy Asprey, who does a few RawTherapee tutorials. Excellent. I'll link to them so you can watch them. He's better than me. But I find with this, because there is not so much information available, so many specific tutorials, how to do X, how to do Y, show you precisely how to do this process to your picture in Photoshop or Lightroom. Using this with all its powerful tools, you are forced to develop some kind of style of your own. Or at least I think maybe you are, right? So that's another advantage to it. Now, all that being said, let's click on a picture of this one, I guess, and I'll show you how it works. Now we're in the editor with this picture open, and the exposure tab is over here on the left. Now you've got histograms, and you've got all kinds of different histograms, and I can't go through all of this comprehensively now because the video would be very long. So the histograms, and over here is exposure. So, like, you know, you can click it up and down, you can drag it up and down, you can use your keyboard to put it up and down, you can set all kinds of cool shortcuts in this. And anyway, I'm gonna drag the exposure down a little bit, and you've got this highlight reconstruction. You can turn it off, turn it on, and select color propagation. Color propagation is the most powerful of these methods of highlight reconstruction. Highlight reconstruction is linked to highlight compression down here. So if you set this to anything other than color propagation, you wouldn't want to drag this up higher than around 100. But with color propagation on, you can drag it up all the way. It will recover highlights by like computationally bleeding nearby colors into them. So if you turn this up too high, it might not look awesome, right? Like, you have to play with it, but I think it's pretty good. I'm going to turn this info off so I can see my picture. There's a threshold for that. I usually don't adjust. Now, this highlight compression, you only want to use this to recover blown highlights, not to darken bright highlights. So I'm going to click on this blown highlight indication so I can make sure I'm not killing it. I'm going to leave a little bit of blown highlights too because we're pointing the camera at the sky here. You can darken highlights later. There's several highlight tools in this. Now, black point, I often don't set this now, but you can. And there's lightness, contrast, saturation. I often don't do them now because there is so much going on here. We're going to have so many adjustments that, you know, so I often leave them zeroed out. You can come back later if you want, but here's a tone curve. This is the auto match tone curve that is trying to automatically match the JPEG that is embedded in your RAW file. So it's, in a way, it's like trying to match what your camera's JPEG looked like, sort of. You can change this to like flatten it. You know, like, let me see. You could just flatten it like that. But I like to use actually the auto match tone curve, and I might even brighten it without adding contrast. I might brighten this, or I might not. I might just leave it at the default, because in RawTherapee, every curve, or well, maybe not every curve, but almost every curve comes with a corresponding counter curve. Here it is, tone curve too. You hear that? Counter curve. So I'll hit standard there. That has my previous settings on it. And what I'll often do with this is just pull it down because I brighten the other one. Now you can play with these as much as you want, but you got two. You got two now. Counter curve. Oh, Lightroom doesn't have a counter curve, does it? Oops. Okay. Anyway, I'm not going to play with this too much. Obviously, you can go to town with these curves, and I find that they can take more adjustment before your picture breaks than in Lightroom. Like the box is bigger, so you can move things around more. It makes it easier. Anyway, I'm not going to play with it too much. You got shadows, highlights. So here's where you could like darken highlights. Darken down bright highlights rather than recover blown highlights, which is what highlight compression up here is for. You got shadows too. You brighten the shadows a bit. I don't know. This doesn't really need it. You've got tone mapping if you like to do like a pseudo HDR kind of thing. I'm not a big fan of this. I almost never use it, maybe sometimes, but if you like this kind of thing, it's there. It's adjustable. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. Definitely you can make good pictures with it. It's not one that I use a lot though. There's dynamic range compression. I use this more. Turn it on and it like compresses the dynamic range of the picture. So, you know, you can recover the contrast later with other adjustments, but with this you can like compress it down. But often at the default this looks kind of bad, but if you turn it down a bit, it really does kind of recover a bit of shadow and highlights. You can play with it yourself. I find it's pretty useful. There's a vignette filter that's adjustable and like can go to white too. I find that's one thing Adobe does better, but like who cares, right? I mean, the vignette filter, right? It's not very crucial, is it? The graduated filter here, this is pretty good. You can see it if you want, and it's all adjustable. I actually had a colored graduated filter on the lens here, so I don't think I need much of this, but for demonstration purposes, I guess. And then you've got the lab adjustments down here. Lightness, contrast, chromaticity, which is like, you know, saturation basically. Oh, click them on. Yeah, saturation. Well, chromaticity. And down, you can avoid color shift, you know, avoid shifting it out of the gamut that you need. So, yeah, protect the skin tones there. And now down here, you've got a bunch of curves. These are super cool. So you've got lab curves. You've got a lightness curve here that, like, you can adjust lightness without affecting the colors. Really? Oops. So that's very useful. I remember this is something I would often do in Photoshop in a very convoluted and annoying way. And now it's right here in the RAW processor. And then you've got the A-B curves. Which I could see doing some really cool color correction with this. Yeah. I almost never use these. I'm only playing with them now because I'm making this video, but wow, these are really cool. This is another thing I used to do in Photoshop in like a really convoluted way, and it's awesome that it's here. I'm just afraid if I get carried away I'll break my picture. Okay, so you've got the lab curves. Okay, look now here you've got luminance according to hue. Oh, Lightroom doesn't have that. Lightroom doesn't have any of these 6 things here. So luminance according to hue. So you can adjust the luminance of a specific hue in your picture. Probably zero that back out though. Alright, that's what I'm doing. Okay, luminance according to hue. You've got chromaticity according to hue. So you can adjust the chromaticity of just one hue of color in your image. Basically the saturation or the, you know, the colorfulness of just one hue of color. You've got hue according to hue. So you can adjust the hue of just one color. You've got the hue of a hue. You can adjust the hue of a hue. You got chromaticity according to chromaticity. So you can adjust the colorfulness of areas according to how colorful they are, making the more colorful areas more colorful and the less colorful areas less, or vice versa. You've got luminance according to chromaticity, so you can adjust the lightness of the colorful parts or the lightness of the less colorful parts according to their colorfulness. And you've got chrominance according to luminance, where you can adjust how colorful something is according to how light it is. Pretty cool. Pretty powerful stuff. Now over to the details tab. You got sharpening. So we'll zoom into 100%. Before we turn on sharpening, I'll just turn on this. Oh, that's focus mask. That'll tell you what's in focus. But no, there's a focus mask. When we turn on sharpening, we'll see it. We can adjust it. Control what gets sharpened and what doesn't. Good to have. And the sharpening I often leave at the default settings, or I might turn up the radius and down the amount a bit. Might turn on halo control. Depending on the picture, this might get adjusted a lot, but the default settings are actually pretty good. I'll just turn the amount down a little. There's an amount for halo control too. Now there's local contrast. This is pretty good, but you can easily overdo it. I like to look at it zoomed out and then zoom in and look again. And this is something that I often turn the amount down quite a lot. But you can do what you think is right. You know, you have to do what you think is right when you're editing your photos. Local contrast. There's edges. I like never use that. There's micro contrast. Is pretty good, pretty cool, but it's probably not going to be great for this picture. There's not much detail going on here anyway. But this is kind of like local contrast, but for the tiniest details. And again, I'll often turn down the quantity. This can also use that contrast mask to control what gets affected by it. Not going to mess around too much. It's just a demo here. Impulse noise reduction I'll often turn on. That's like reducing like sensor noise or something, but I think it's more useful in like high ISO or long exposures or something. But I often turn it on because there seems to be no downside to doing so. And here's the noise reduction now. I'll zoom in and turn it on. I find this is kind of a weak point for RawTherapee. It's not that it's that bad, it's just that maybe it's a bit easier to achieve what you want in some other softwares. You can do it in this. You can achieve what you want in this, but it might not be quite as easy or automatic. Now when you turn it on, that looks pretty good for this picture. When you turn it on, the defaults is to do automatic noise reduction for chrominance noise, that's color noise, and to not do any luminance noise reduction. They're zeroed out. And for this picture, that's actually going to be fine. But you can turn up luminance noise if you want. Now the luminance noise reduction in this works. The problem is I find when you turn it up, the noise goes away, but detail can go away too. It might not be as as smart, maybe. I hate to use that word, but it might not be as smart as some other noise reduction, for preserving detail. Now, of course, you turn up the luminance noise reduction and you can turn up detail recovery. That's like the detail tab sort of in the noise reduction of Adobe. Nothing to get really excited about. I often just leave them zeroed out on a picture like this anyway. Because there's other things I'll show you that you can use to deal with noise now, later. If this was a high ISO picture, I might turn the chrominance to manual and turn it up a bit if the automatic wasn't cutting it, and then do some luminance noise reduction and detail recovery. And then there's a median filter. It's actually pretty useful for like astro photos and things like that, but probably not for your average picture. Defringe here is actually useful. Let's see if we can find. I think there's some fringe type stuff here. Turn on defringe and see what we can do here. A bit of red fringing, so we'll turn up this red, and the red fringing should go away. Now the problem with this is it can mess up colors. Like if you had a fringe on someone's face, for example, and you turn this up, then their skin tone can get messed up or something. But you can see it does reduce a bit of the fringing on those trees, and this is good for like, there's automatic chromatic aberration reduction in this, and there's a few ways of dealing with chromatic aberration, but this is good for like fringing, like not chromatic aberration, like lens fringing, and like you got yellow fringing. Look, see, you can adjust fringing of all different colors. So it's good, and it's good if the automatic tools aren't cutting it. Contrast by detail levels here can adjust the contrast of the finest to coarsest levels of detail in 6 different levels, 0 through 5. I pretty much never use it because there's a similar thing over in another tool that I'm going to show you in a minute. But, well, we'll just click it on just to show you, but I pretty much never use this. There's something else you can do. Well, we'll click it up a few levels. Click it up right high so you can see its effect. See? It really does enhance detail, but you really can't overdo it. Turn it down, make it more reasonable. Now turn it off because I don't use it. And there's haze removal. This is new. I've been using RawTherapee for just under a year, and I've gotten 2 major updates with new features and dramatic improvements to existing features, even though it's free. So we got haze removal. Whoa, it's pretty strong. You can turn down the strength of that effect. Even though this picture has haze, I don't think I want much haze removal because I like the haze. I climbed up a mountain to see haze. So anyway, this picture isn't really of anything, and we're just doing a demo here. Now, white balance I find in RawTherapee is pretty good. You can pick a white point if you want. The automatic is often surprisingly good, but I bet for this picture, not that great. But it often, often the auto looks better than you expect it would if you're used to like Lightroom. And also the adjustments of it. I used to use a Capture NX years ago, and I found you could achieve a look with that you couldn't with Adobe in the white balance, and this reminds me of it. On the green purple axis you can really get some good looking looks, you know, that I find Adobe doesn't do as well. And you've got a red-blue equalizer. That's mainly for if you're like taking pictures underwater or something. You got vibrance here that you can link and adjust the pastel and saturated tones together. Or you can unlink them and you could just turn up like the pastels and down the saturated tones. Jesus, that's wild. Or you could do vice versa. You know, I'm using extreme numbers here just to show you the effect. I sometimes use this, but not that often. There's channel mixer. I don't use that hardly at all. Black and white I never use is another way to do it. Hue saturation value. So you can adjust hue, saturation, and value, which I think is like lightness. But I don't bother with that. And now here's something that I do bother with, which is film simulation. I'll turn this on. You can click here to fit to the screen or to go 1-1, by the way. Okay, so film simulation, you got black and whites. I often like the Ilford ones for black and white, but this is not a black and white picture. You might see this going kind of slow too, but RawTherapee is actually pretty quick, but it depends. When you turn on certain adjustments, it starts to slow down, right? But this is, anyway, this is a color picture. And maybe we'll try a Fuji Velvia 50. Oh my gosh, that's a bit strong. Now, of course, with the film simulation, you can reduce the effect of it. And I also feel now like I'm a bit too dark here. Come back over here. Maybe try a few Kodaks instead. Anyway, you can see this film simulation is pretty cool. You've got just a lot of choices. Now, some of these are ones that I added myself, but the ones I'm showing you, they're all included in the pack that you download from Rawpedia. I'm just going to stick with that one for now because I don't have time to go through and pick one. Soft light is new, part of one of the new updates, and I don't know exactly how to describe it. It's almost like dehaze, but not exactly. But I find it's a pretty cool effect, and like most things, I'll turn it down a bit. You got RGB curves. I often don't use them either. And color toning, this is pretty cool. I usually use this lab color correction grid, and you can make the highlights. Oh, we'll turn that tool on. Make the highlights go bluer or greener or oranger or purpler. And then for the shadows, you can do the same or the opposite or whatever you like. And it's pretty cool. I mean, you can use this to correct color, or you can use this to uncorrect color, whatever you like. But it's pretty powerful and convenient. I think I'm going to make the shadows a bit blue. And the highlights a bit green. And let's see what it looks like before and after. I think it's cool, but I don't have time to keep adjusting it. You can see it's a cool tool there. And then you've got color management here. Now, auto match camera profile is usually good. You can create your own and you can get as involved as you want. I'm not going to go into it. But what I am going to go into is here the working profile is Pro Photo, and I see no reason why you'd want to change that. The output profile down here, RTV4 sRGB, is fine if you were outputting this as a final product. But if you're outputting this to edit further in another application, you probably should select RTV4 large, which is closer to Pro Photo RGB, and this RTV4 sRGB is closer to, sorry, what did I say? RTV4 large is closer to Adobe RGB, and this is closer to sRGB. And the RTV4 sRGB is better than sRGB in some way. You can read about it at RawPedia if you want, but if it is open in a non-color managed application, it will be just like sRGB. You don't have to worry about it. So set it to RTV4 sRGB or RTV4 large if you're going to edit it in another application. I often try to just output it if I can, so I'm going to leave it like that. I'm just using this picture for demonstration anyway. Now we're over to what they call the Advanced tab. And here you have the Retinex tool. CIE Color Appearance Model 2002 tool. I love the name of that, guys. And the wavelet levels. So Retinex is not going to look good on this picture. You'll see the effect though. It's pretty dramatic, but have a look at this. Here's a picture. It's kind of another dud picture, but I processed this in Adobe and I clicked export when it looked like this, and then I did it in RawTherapee and it looked like this. Let's turn off Retinex. Wow, look what Retinex did. Basically, it's like you're able to see more stars. So it's really cool for astrophotography, and I love it. But it's not good for like most normal pictures. You can do whatever you like, but I'd say it's not good. CIE Color Appearance Model 2002. This is kind of like you could use this instead of or in addition to your lab adjustments over at the bottom of the exposure tab. But the CIE Color Appearance is different. And you're going to have to read about it if you want to know why. If you're like a computer engineer, you can read RawPedia and you'll probably understand the difference. But if you want to know how to use it, basically just click it on. And if you think it looks better in any way, use it. If you click it on and it looks really bad, don't use it. Use the lab adjustments over there instead. I think this looks... I don't think it looks better, but I'm going to pretend I do. And just drag the lightness. Now you've got lightness, chroma, you can protect skin tones, and contrast. So I'm just going to play with them. And you've got more curves down here, which they default to what you had set previously, even if it was another picture. Not a huge fan of that. The other thing is the behavior of everything in this can be changed. If you're willing to figure out how to do it and go do it, you can probably change almost everything about the way this behaves. But as you can see, you get plenty of chances to do another curve. We're going to have like many more chances to do another curve after this. One of the problems with this is that it's easy to overdo things. Anyway, I'm not going to get too stressed out about it now. Wavelet levels now. We'll turn this on. Now, wavelet levels is one of the coolest things in RawTherapee. But I'm not the one to explain it to you. I don't have a PhD in like image processing, but basically it breaks the picture down into levels, and we're now looking at all the levels and we're seeing a picture, but the computer is breaking it down, and we can look at one level at a time, levels 1 through 9, and then an extra level, and yeah, why not, and a residual image. So like level 1 looks like this. Let's zoom in to 100%. There's level 1. Takes a while to load up. The more of these advanced tools you turn on, the more things can slow down. It's level 2. Level 3. Level 4. Level 5. Now, if you had a noisy picture and you weren't happy with what's happening in the noise reduction over there in the details tab, you could come over here and locate which level the noise is on, and then come down here to denoise and refine and reduce noise just on that level. This picture isn't very noisy, so I'm not going to get involved with that here, because how am I going to reduce like imaginary noise? But it's pretty cool that you can do that. Now I'm going to go back to all levels because I'm getting disorientated here. Now, with the wavelets, you've got this contrast setting, and you can adjust the contrast of the finest to the coarsest details, kind of like this contrast by detail levels over in the details tab. And with the wavelets one, like some people, I think people use this for like beauty retouching, where they could find the level that a blemish is on and reduce its contrast, and you can keep your skin texture and beard stubble or whatever you have and just lose the blemish only, things like that. And the other thing it's really good for is enhancing detail. So what I often do is just click it up a few clicks like that, and you can see it by default it increases the finest level more than the coarsest level per each click, right? And we can turn it off and on to see what it looks like. I try not to turn anything up too much. And of course you can come in and just adjust just a level, one level. Sometimes I want the finest ones up more, but I don't want the coarsest ones up because it has too much of an effect on the picture overall. Now with these wavelet settings, they're visible at all zoom levels, but they're only really accurate at 100%. So when you're adjusting them, you want to be zoomed to 100%. You can adjust chroma color on the levels too. There's some toning you can do here. I don't even know how that works. There's the denoise, which is really cool for a noisy picture. Edge sharpness, I don't know. I don't use that. But what I do like sometimes down here is the residual image, where you can adjust shadows and highlights and contrast and chroma on your residual image, which is like what is left when all the levels that have image in them are taken away. But effectively, like, you can reduce contrast here on the residual image and then you would be able to add more contrast over in, say, the exposure tab than you otherwise would, right? Without like breaking your picture, maybe, you know? And then contrast, residual image, and the end, there's like a final touch up where you get 2 more chances to do like curves and equalizers for like local contrast and stuff, which like, that's the thing about this, like it's almost overwhelming. Like you get so many chances to do a curve or something, and you know, look at this picture here. I think we've broken it. We've done so much to it, so it's easy to get carried away. You have to practice, you have to learn it, you have to develop your own style, and I consider that a feature, not a bug. But you know, I've been playing with it for a year and I'm still getting used to it. But that's basically it for the exposure and the color adjustments. Now over here there's transform tab where you can crop the picture just by dragging around the corners. So crop it a little bit. You can let me see, crop. You can grab a straight line here somewhere. Yeah, here you can select a straight line if you had to straighten a horizon or something, and you can reset it. Don't need it for this picture. Here's resize, and you can resize to whatever dimensions you want for the output image, upscale even. And there's post resize sharpening, but you don't know what settings to use for this. You would have to like output the picture at the size you want, then open that in RawTherapee, go through the sharpening settings with it, note down the settings, and then put them into this post resize sharpening. So it's kind of convoluted. I can think of easier ways to do it myself, but if you did want to do it to like a batch of pictures, I can see it being convenient, and I have done that, and it is convenient. There's lens and geometry settings, like you can do like, you know, perspective correction or perspective decorrection, whatever you like. And there's lens profiles. I'll often turn these off. My lenses are usually good, but oh no, I want it on this picture, don't I? Or maybe I'll just go to manual and turn off the geometric distortion, but leave the vignetting. Is that right? Anyway, often I will set it to none, but they do have profiles for most common lenses. I'll often turn the geometric off unless it's bothering me. And then there's, you know, you can pin cushion or barrel your picture if you want, or de-pin cushion or de-barrel it if the automatic isn't doing it already. There is chromatic aberration if the automatic isn't cutting it for you. And there's actually, this is not where I would do chromatic aberration, not here in the lens profiles or here. It's done over here in the raw settings. I'll show you in a second. So yeah, and there's vignetting correction. You don't have to bother with this either. It's either done automatically or you can do it over an exposure. Now with the demosaicing, Amaze is the default for Bayer sensors. Leave it there mostly. I think DCB or maybe RCD, I think it's DCB is the one for high ISO. You can check it on Rawpedia, but there is one that is better for high ISO, and there's ones for Fuji We're not seeing them here because this is not a Fuji file. They'll show up if there's a Fuji file. And you can see there's all sorts of others. So you get options, options that you don't even need. It's always good to have options that you don't even need. And then, like, I don't bother with any of these settings except see, chromatic aberration auto correction is on by default, and that's why you don't usually have to bother with any of the other ones. Hot pixel filter is awesome. Turn it on, but I don't think there's any in this picture. And now you can do a dark frame where basically you over here in the preferences you can tell it where your dark frame directory is, and then it will like select the dark frame with the nearest settings to this picture and apply it. If you're into that sort of thing, I love doing it. And it's got a flat field if you're really, really into things and you have lots of time on your hands, which is for, like, I think correcting like a lens distortion and things like that. Anyway, it's all very cool, and that's about it for RawTherapee. Now, the main thing I wanted to say with this is, like, this is better, and you should quit your Adobe subscription. Peace.